I'm American, but I don't even know the rules to American football, basketball, or baseball. The only major sporting event that I enjoy and know the rules to is football. And yes, I said football. I refuse to call it soccer. Ew. My name is Peter. I mostly grew up in the United States, but now I live in Scotland. The World Cup is by far the biggest sporting event on earth. And with living abroad, I've experienced it from two completely different perspectives. Today, I want to talk about why it's unlike anything else, and what I think is the main reason why Americans just don't care about football. World Cup 1998 in France is the first World Cup that I remember as a kid. I actually just rewatched that Nike World Cup ad with the Brazilian team at the airport, and it was like pure nostalgia. Why don't they make ads like that anymore? Every time I hear the song Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba, I think about football, because that was the main soundtrack song in the World Cup 1998 computer game. I was obviously rooting for Germany, and was as devastated as a little kid could be when we crashed out in the quarterfinals against Croatia. Luckily, I was able to watch them do better in future tournaments, like in 2014 for the infamous semifinal game against Brazil, which they then ended up going on to win the whole thing. Unfortunately, it's been a bit downhill for the German national team since then, but hopefully things will improve for World Cup 2030. Now, let me remind you, I'm not fully American. I'm just as much German as I am American, which is probably the main reason why I was drawn to being interested in football instead of the silly little games that the average American plays. Growing up, I wasn't exposed to American games. I was exposed to football. My dad watched proper football games and follows the sport vigorously. And while I never became as big of a football fan as he is, I at least was raised with a proper understanding of the sport. If you try to talk to the average American about football, they will probably have no clue about the game. They won't know the rules, and many of them somehow don't even realize how massive football and the World Cup is. You'll see videos online of Americans talking about how the Super Bowl final, which it gets about 120 million viewers, is the biggest sporting event in the world. And as comical as that might seem, since the last World Cup final had 1.5 billion viewers, that actually is the viewpoint of many Americans. Not all of them, but many. Even with the World Cup being partially hosted there this year, many Americans didn't even know that the World Cup was happening or that it was happening and being hosted by the United States. My best friend lives in Ohio, and she didn't even know about it until literally the day before the tournament started. I know there will be pockets of places, especially in cities that are hosting the games, but it's not at all the same kind of hype as what you'd get in other countries, like here in Scotland. Football is the #1 sport in the world, and at the professional level, there are basically two types of football games: international games like what you see at the World Cup, and club games. This kind of ties into my point of what I really enjoy about the World Cup. You see, I am by no means a football fanatic. Other than the World Cup, every 4 years and sometimes the Euros, I don't really follow football. This time around, the only player on the German national team whose name I even knew was Neuer. And that's only because he's been their goalkeeper for literally half my life. I do enjoy club games, and they do produce some top tier football matches, but in many ways it's just because of the money. If the club has enough money, they can just buy a fantastic team of world-class players. But for international football, the rules are completely different. In order to play for your country's team, you have to be a citizen of the country and prove a genuine link, like being born there or having parents who were born there or living there for at least 5 years. If you're a dual citizen, you also generally can't switch which team you play for. Like me, I am a dual German and American citizen. So if I would have become a footballer and been any good at it, I could have played for either the German or the USA national football team. But once I started playing for one, I wouldn't be able to switch to the other team. I think this is one of the things that adds to the appeal of the World Cup. Yeah, there are some major issues and controversy surrounding FIFA, like splitting the game up to slot in extra ad breaks and some pretty terrible calls with regards to VAR and many other things that I'm not going to get into. And at least from the perspective of FIFA, it is increasingly becoming more and more just about the money, in my opinion. But even with all of that, the World Cup still brings people together and unites people all around the world, unlike any other sporting event. Just look at what happened with the Tartan Army and their effect on the people of Boston. They literally drank the pubs dry, and the locals were enamored with the amazing experience of the visiting Scots. They were putting traffic cones on the statues, they made Glasgow and Boston sister cities, and the governor even did a cheeky bit of legalizing haggis in Massachusetts. Another example of why I care more about the World Cup than about club games is seeing its effects here in my adopted country of Scotland. In Glasgow, there is a massive football rivalry between Celtic and Rangers. It's like the fans literally hate each other whenever they play. And even just in the last 5 years I've lived here, there have been multiple occasions of massive fights and basically riots breaking out over the football games, which is incredibly childish. I know this is not an issue that's exclusive to club football, but it's interesting to contrast that to the Scotland team being in the World Cup for the first time since 1998. The Scotland national team has players from both Celtic and Rangers, and when they were playing, the entire country came together to support them. We even got an extra bank holiday out of it. At the beginning of this World Cup, there were 3 teams that I primarily supported, and unfortunately all of them have now been eliminated. Firstly, I supported Scotland. This is their first World Cup appearance in almost 30 years, and the excitement was electric. Next, I supported Iran because the World Cup is partially being hosted by the United States, and I don't think I need to explain why it would be amazing if Iran did really well. And then, of course, I supported Germany, my home country. It was sad to see them eliminated so early, especially since they literally had a goal stolen from them against Paraguay by a terrible referee call and should have gone through. But to be fair, while I'll always support Germany, they also haven't really been playing that well since they last won the World Cup in 2014. So now that all 3 of those teams have been eliminated, I am back to supporting the underdogs. If you're new to following football and you're wondering who you should support, especially if your country isn't in the World Cup or has already been eliminated, let me help you out with that. Because there is a little bit of nuance that can come with it, and one big exception. The general rule of thumb is that first you'll support based off of geography and heritage. Pick the country where you are from, where your parents or grandparents were from, or the country where you live now. Maybe also the country where your partner or spouse is from if it's different. After that, you should support the underdogs. Look at which team is expected to win and support whoever's playing against them, because there is magic in watching a game that, according to the stats, should be an easy win for the better team, but then isn't. For example, in the Brazil versus Japan game, Brazil was expected to win, so I supported Japan. In last night's game of Argentina against Cabo Verde, Argentina was also expected to win very easily, and Cabo Verde, against all odds, almost beat them. Lastly, and this is probably the most important exception that overrides all the other rules, which is that if England is playing, you should support whoever is playing against them, regardless of which team it is. At the beginning, I said I'd talk about what I think is the main reason why Americans don't care about football. And I know this might be a pessimistic viewpoint, but I think it all just comes down to big money. I know that there has been an increase in interest for proper football over the last few weeks with the World Cup. And while I hope it does stick, I'm not confident that the increased interest will be meaningful in the long term. I really hope that the Messi effect and Gen Z streaming habits and everything will help shift the numbers in participation, but who knows? We'll see. There is loads of money in football, really too much, but when it comes down to the actual gameplay, it is fairly restrictive for maximizing pure profit. A standard football match has 2 uninterrupted 45-minute halves, and for the American oligarchs, that's no good because where are you going to put all of the ad breaks? An American football game lasts for about 3 hours, but there's literally only about 10 to 15 minutes of actual gameplay where the ball is moving. That sounds really boring to me, but also it means that literally 1/3 of the game is ad breaks. I looked it up and the Super Bowl final usually has 50 to 70 commercials, and when you add in the local ads, it can get to over 100 commercials during one single game. That doesn't sound like a fun sport to watch, but it does sound super profitable for massive companies, which I think is why the sport is heavily pushed onto the American population. It's a massive part of the economy, and there is big money, not just in professional sports, but also in college and even high school American football. It's really weird. The United States has a massive investment in keeping the typical American sports alive and infrastructure to churn out players and money, where even the college football generates like $14 billion per year. When it comes to real football, they have the MLS, and yes, the women's national team is one of the best in the world, but they don't really have much more than that. There's no rich club football history or a strong investment in infrastructure for real football for people of all ages. And everything is also a closed franchise model. For example, in Germany, there are multiple leagues that the teams can move up or down based on how they perform. My home team in Germany would be 1 FC Nürnberg, and they are literally the textbook Fahrstuhlmannschaft, consistently moving up to the first Bundesliga and then being relegated because they're too good for the second Bundesliga, but not quite good enough for the first Bundesliga. On top of the ad revenue, the actual broadcast rights are a massive moneymaker in the States and heavily weighted towards American sports. It's been over a decade now, but I used to work for DirecTV, a television provider in the US. And at the time, one of our biggest selling points was that we were the exclusive rights holder for the NFL Sunday Ticket, a package that, with some exceptions, would let you watch every NFL game. That package alone was $250 to $350 per season on top of what you already paid for your monthly subscription, which at the time, this was over 10 years ago, was about $100 to $150 per month. If you wanted to watch all the MLB games or college football games or basketball games, those were also usually in separate packages that you had to add on. On the flip side, proper football just isn't televised very well in the US. At the time, the best way to watch football was to buy an international programming package and get some of the Spanish programming channels. Whereas here in Scotland, the World Cup games are free to watch on BBC Sport if you have a TV license. And even the additional sports packages from standard TV providers are much cheaper than what you'd pay in the US. In the United States, proper football is much harder to encounter, and it takes much more effort to even have access to the games, whereas here I find it's much easier and quite a bit cheaper. The things that you're interested in are heavily influenced by your experiences and exposure to them, especially as a child. When it comes to sports, the United States has a massive investment in the American sports, and people kind of develop a cult-like identity with their local professional team or college team, but there's not really much there for developing an interest in real football. So there you have it, my thoughts on the World Cup and football in general. I also want to give a major shout out to the Italian national team. They actually have not lost a single World Cup football match since 2014. absolutely fantastic. Also, side note, can we talk about how the 2026 World Cup logo looks like AI generated garbage compared to previous logos? All the previous logos are works of art, and this time it's literally just a PNG photo of the trophy slapped on top of the numbers 26. I absolutely hate it. If you're new here, it would really help out my channel if you smash that like and subscribe button with the same vigor as Germany against Brazil in the 2014 World Cup semifinals. And let me know in the comments which team you're supporting in this World Cup and why. Anyways, that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.